Hey, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. First YouTube live that I believe we've done in the new Congress since swearing in, getting through that very lengthy speakers vote, other things going on. It's great to be, actually, it looks like the lights just went off in my office, but we got enough light with these lights. I think I had some people in my office and one of them hit maybe the dimmer on it or something, but I kind of liked the way that looked for a moment. But anyways, we got the lights back on now. I want to talk about a couple different pieces of legislation that we're going to be introducing this week. Want to talk about some of the things that have gone on around the country and in legislation this week, and then answer some of your questions as we do, as always. So first thing that I want to talk about, the first nationwide grounding of all flights across the United States of America since 9/11. And I spoke about this on Harris Faulkner's show earlier today, and it really goes to something specifically known as NOTAM, and that's Notice to Air Missions is what that actually stands for. And the way I tell people to kind of think about this, I sit on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. I sit on the Aviation Subcommittee. So these are things that we end up dealing with directly on committee. The way I tell people to kind of think about that is think of it like the messaging system between ground sensors and safety issues at an airport, the air traffic control towers and the controllers that are in there, having correspondence with those that are on the flights, whether it be commercial aviation, general aviation, passenger airliners, you name it, and that messaging system between them. Now, it can happen that they deliver those messages just by voice, getting over the radio and talking to somebody on that. But the system right now, as it is largely an automated system. That system went down, and it went down in varying degrees in different places. It wasn't just a sensor went down in one place, and that caused, it wasn't one went down in LAX and one at LaGuardia and one in Atlanta and one at Miami or other places. Like, the entire system of communications in some form or fashion went down in a number of varying locations in a number of different times. And that brought about the grounding of all aircraft for, basically half the day here in the country. So, in that, if you have questions about anything more specific on that, ask your questions on it. We're happy to reply to that, let you know, some of the things you might be wondering. But as always, like, subscribe. You'll know when we're doing these Q&As, and try to get you the answers to the things that you care about. It is something that Congress noticed about. I don't know, a couple of years back, appropriating dollars to work to fix this system, saying that it was getting old, antiquated, it needed to be fixed. Now, whether I can't exactly speculate to say whether this was a cyber attack or whether this was just it being old or outdated or something. There's nothing yet to point to that it was some kind of a cyber attack, but that doesn't mean that it won't come to that point. But that is a question that I've had from a number of people. And, the simple fact is 24 hours out, less than 24 hours out, there's not an answer to that question yet to be delivered to the American people. So I want to talk about a couple of bills that we're introducing this week on top of some other things. We're introducing one called the CABS Act. And I want to say, that stands for, well, I can't remember all the part of the acronym on what it stands for, but here's the point of it. The point of this bill is that right now there's a double standard for how people that drive trucks and what age they are able to get goods out of ports or move them around the state or move them to different places. So here's what happens. If you want to drive truck and you have your truck driver's license, your CDL, and you want to pick something up in Tallahassee, Florida, and you want to deliver it to Palm Beach, Florida, you can do that between the ages of 18 and 21. Now, if you want to pick something up out of the port of Palm Beach, Florida, directly out of the port and deliver that to Tallahassee or somewhere else, you can't do that if you're between the ages of 18 and 21. That creates some of the problems, with our supply chain as a result of not having as many truck drivers that can go out there and do that. Why does that exist? That exists because that stuff coming out of the port is labeled interstate commerce. So it's a little bit different in terms of the legislation that affects it. And the legislation that affects it right now doesn't allow people of that age group that could otherwise move things around the state to not be able to move things out of the port and then around the state. So that's legislation to fix that. Another piece of legislation that we introduced this week as well is legislation. This used to be a two-part piece of legislation. We were able to get half of this legislation fixed and move forward in law. So now we're trying to move the other half of this legislation. This is related to vaccine mandates. So the first part of the legislation previously was to get rid of the vaccine mandates, not just across the country, but for those specifically those members of the military. That was something we got through in a piece of legislation that previously passed, known as the National Defense Authorization Act. Here's part two of that. Part two is to say those thousands, literally thousands of members of the military that were discharged, separated from the military, need to have the opportunity. We're not going to force them back in the military, but they need to have the opportunity to be reinstated at their rank that they were separated at, accruing that time in service that they were separated at, and not being docked in that way for the time that they were basically given the unjustified boot out of the military, in my opinion. So that's a little bit on a couple of the bills that we've been working on this week. I want to give you guys two other things, two committees that we're working on in Congress right now. Actually, I'll give you three committees, give you something on three committees. So number one, there's going to be a new select committee on just dealing with China. This is going to take members from all committees. I sit on Foreign Affairs and Transportation and Infrastructure. I wouldn't mind being on that committee as well, dealing with China as the select committee on, their intellectual property theft, the land that they're purchasing domestically, within our, let's say from the Atlantic to the Pacific, or the land that they're purchasing in places in the Bahamas or South Central America, other places like that, how that affects what they're doing with the materials and the ability for us to source materials for technology or for weapon systems or jet engines or things like that, with things that we need to just metals that we need to go out there and produce the things that we need for our military or cell phones. That's something that we'll be looking at. There's a host of different issues that we'll be looking at China for. So if you have questions on that, don't hesitate to ask your questions on that as well. There will be a select committee on that just dealing with China. And this is something that I've complained about for a long time, for as long as I've been in Congress. I've been telling people I've yet to sit down with all of the members of the Foreign Affairs Committee, all of the members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, the Pentagon, the State Department, everybody, all those people at the table, and say, hey, what do we do about this China thing that everybody agrees is a major issue on all of these fronts? It hasn't taken place. That is a strategic blunder, and it's something that I've been working on to change, and this is a part of accomplishing that change, is getting this China Select Committee. So that's something that I wanted to say. If you have any more questions on the China Select Committee, let us know about that. Last committee that I want to cover, speaking about that, is weaponization of government. Kevin McCarthy has said that he is going to begin a committee specifically on the weaponization of government. That could mean a number of different things, both what the government does and what the government does not do in equal application of the law. So it could be whether it's being the case that they have unleashed the FBI on parents that were attending school board meetings somewhere in Virginia because the FBI wanted to go after them. That would be a weaponization of the government. Or whether it be the fact that some of these agencies are not giving the same effort to look into those that are bombing or painting, graffitiing, fire, starting fires at, you name it, pregnancy crisis centers, right? That can be an example of an unequal application of what's going on. So I was told to give a timeout for a minute here. Let's see what's going on. You guys good? All right. We thought we had a little bit of issue with the sound, but apparently the sound is all right. So I guess we'll continue on with that. So there's going to be a subcommittee, a special select committee on the weaponization of government, which could mean a number of different things. If you have questions on that, again, don't hesitate to ask your questions on that. So in that, we'd like to get to your questions, answer the things that matter to you most. If you want to know when these are, as always, subscribe. You know when we're doing these impromptu Q&A sessions. Try to keep you guys updated. And Jimwood, can you give me a question from somebody? We'll try to get an answer to it. So here's a question. What do you think about opposed to sending money to foreign countries who oftentimes hate us, providing additional money to our veterans and service members? So I think I get the tenor of that question. One, I don't like sending money to other countries. It's your money. All the money that goes through Washington, D.C. came out of one of your pockets. There's no business or factory that people here in Washington go to work on, add to the GDP, bringing those goods to market and things like that. It all comes out of your pocket. And I hate when it's sent to other countries. This is a good opportunity to talk about something on border and talk about something on committees. So the committee that I hope, the subcommittee that I hope to chair on the Foreign Affairs Committee, we will have a new subcommittee on oversight and accountability. Where are those dollars going in the Ukraine? What's going on with China in a number of different fronts? What happened with the Afghanistan withdrawal and your billions of dollars of military equipment that stayed over there? The list goes on for things that we can do oversight for foreign activities, foreign affairs, and accountability on that. I hope to chair that subcommittee. Let me use that also to talk as an opportunity to talk a little bit about the southern border, in part, dollars going overseas. So when you look at our southern border, you look at what happened this week. President Biden was meeting with the president of Canada, the president of Mexico, having conversations about border and a number of different issues. Now, the way that President Biden and Vice President Harris see solving our border crisis, it's not proposing that our border be more secure. It's not dealing with the issues of those crossing the border illegally, the wall, or a host of other things. It's not dealing with all of the money that they're spending, sending people around the country, dealing with their health issues, getting people into towns across America where they'll sit and wait for years to have their issues adjudicated. Here's what they really want to do. They think that the problem is infrastructure and things like that in South and Central America. They think that, as we know, fundamentally, America is a very, very flawed country. And so they think if, they can change America and take your dollars and send them into these South and Central American countries, that people will stop coming to our southern border. And here's why I think they're fundamentally wrong and have thought this for a long time. No matter what, Mexico, and this, I'm not trying to just, sit here and insult Mexico. I'm just trying to state what I believe to be the facts. Mexico is never going to be the land of opportunity. It's never going to be what the United States of America is. They're not working towards that. They're not working towards controlling their cartels that run the southern border, murder people in the most horrific ways, work to facilitate all the drugs and human trafficking across our southern border, killing Americans, killing anybody else, really not caring about it. That is Mexico. They're not going to be the land of opportunity. And so, and then even to say on top of that, nobody is ever going to be as good as the United States of America. So this idea that they can improve the infrastructure or something else in some other place, America is always going to be a draw because we're always going to be better, in my opinion. That doesn't mean that we take your dollars when, as we saw with the FAA and what's going on with that NOTAM system that I spoke about already, we have infrastructure issues that need to be secured and need to be fixed here in the United States of America. Let's not go over there and fix all those things in all of the South Central American countries. We're going to take another question in 1 second and get that ready to fire off. I want to give one other point of what's happening in Washington, D.C. with sending your money overseas. Everybody knows what's going on with the Ukraine. Let me tell you what's already happening with the Ukraine before this war is even over. There is not an effort by this administration to say, hey, Russia, whenever you are finally defeated and you're sent back within your own borders, we're going to extract, euros, pounds sterling, American dollars, rubles, whatever it is, to make sure that you pay for every life that you've taken over there, every life that you've destroyed over there, the infrastructure that you've destroyed. That effort is not going on diplomatically by the United States of America. What is going on with people in Washington right now is that they're already plotting and planning how to tell the Ukraine that they're going to take you all, your taxpayer dollars, and go over to Ukraine and rebuild the Ukraine. Now, I have a great level of sympathy for what's going on in the Ukraine and the way people are living over there, the lack of energy and power that they have. The list goes on. That's a very, very serious issue. But the fact that our government is not telling Russia that they are going to account for every single penny that's owed, but that they're already looking to plan for you, the American people, to pay to rebuild this, when the fact of the matter is we have our own country to take care of on these fronts, that to me is very troublesome, something that I'll continue to keep you updated on. So let's go to the next question, Jim. All right. What exactly do you think you can do about China? It's another country run by a different government on the other side of the planet. There's a lot of things that we can do about China, and specifically how they affect things for the United States of America.
Number one, let's look at things just within our borders. The United States of America is still the predominant, the number one place that people want to come and be educated. The amount of Chinese nationals that are here being educated in the United States of America at our universities, that we educate them, and then we send them back to their country to become competitive to us, that's an issue. So whether we try to retain those individuals here to keep, after they've been educated here, to keep them here and make them Americans, or whether we don't have those individuals educated here, those are two very different paths. But the fact of the matter is, we are educating our competition and then sending them off. That's a big issue. What goes on with their currency manipulation is something that we can address, especially as it comes to trade policy. President Trump addressed this very well in what he did with tariffs on goods, specifically those coming out of China. He addressed that with Mexico as well on a number of different fronts. What we do, whether they're allowed to buy up land, and when I say they, you got to bear in mind that China is run by the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. And they have a number of, let's say very wealthy individuals that are essentially run by the Chinese Communist Party, acting as international business persons that will come over here to the United States of America and buy up a farm, or buy up, this business right outside of a military base, or buy up something else. We know who those individuals are. We know exactly what it is they're doing, the way that they're spying, whether they're parking, one of their mega yachts somewhere here in the United States of America, but they're really using it for spying. The list goes on of things that we know that they are doing. Those are things that we can bring to an end. And the list goes on for where we can be strategic and tactical about making sure that the United States of America is the best, is where everybody wants to do business, is where everybody wants to produce. Because we've made it a system, whether it be through the lack of taxation for corporations and businesses, making a better business environment, whether it be the way that individuals here are educated and present the best possible workforce for anybody to have their products developed. The list goes on of things that we can do to make America more competitive and put China on their heels, so that they are less competitive compared to us, and make sure that we are safe, that we are secure from their efforts to infiltrate the United States of America, our military installations, and a host of other things as well. So those are a few examples of what I think we can be doing on China. Jim, look, I'm going to get a sip of water here. Let's go to another question. So, all right, we need somebody to check the politicization of the FBI and the Department of Justice. That is 100% true. I know a lot of our agents, both locally and in our area of Florida, that I have the opportunity to represent. I know agents around the country. I don't think that is where the problem stems from whatsoever. It stems from the head of these agencies, head of the FBI, head of Department of Justice, individuals like Merrick Garland and others that specifically look to weaponize the government, specifically look to weaponize the IRS, to go after conservatives, to go after people because they have Republican in front of their name. Anybody that thinks that hasn't happened, it has absolutely happened. It's beyond contestation. Let me give you, one example right now of where Democrats are at on this issue, because it has become very politicized. Yesterday, I was sitting in my office here. I was watching the television for a few minutes, watching the weekly Democrat press briefing. It's where all their leadership gets together in front of all of the cameras and say what they think about all the legislation or different things going on in the country. And here's a quote from their conference chair, kind of their lead person to the press. And what that individual said was this. They said, the weaponization of, the special select committee on the weaponization of government, or as we like to call it, the tinfoil hat committee. That's what they said about it. They look at it as something that doesn't exist whatsoever. There's no weaponization of government. The FBI that was directed to look into those parents that were at school board meetings in Virginia, that wasn't the weaponization of government. IRS going after conservatives, that's not the weaponization of government. Not looking into what's happening, with those that are looking to torch a pregnancy crisis center, that's not the weaponization of government. The list goes on and on. We could probably start to apply this to the way the Department of Justice will send the FBI to President Trump's home, but we'll certainly see the way that they look to address what's going on with the documents that have now been found to go through the hands of President Biden, former Vice President Biden, at somewhere between when he was Vice President and President. And let me give a couple of comments on that while I bring it up, and just why the Democrats that you see on TV from Capitol Hill are literally spewing lies. What they're trying to go out there and say, they're trying to say, well, President Biden, he did this right. He came forward and he admitted that they found some documents. Yeah, he admitted that this happened well after the midterm elections had already occurred. That actually, they found out that occurred long before the midterm elections. So we waited until after the elections. That's a politicization of what was going on. Let me tell you something else that was very different about this. So when those documents were at Mar-a-Lago, bear in mind that President Trump and Melania and Barron Trump, they weren't sitting inside of the White House taping up boxes and then putting packing peanuts in them and packing everything into the boxes and then loading them, carrying them into a moving truck, a U-Haul truck, and getting them delivered down to Florida. There was an agency that did that, known as the National Archives and Records Administration. They do that for every president, vice president, probably those that are cabinet secretaries and others as well, but they certainly do it for the president and vice president. They're the ones that do that. They take everything, they load it into the boxes, they take inventory of what it is. That is how they knew exactly where that stuff was located and what it was that was located inside of Mar-a-Lago, because they moved it there, they unpacked it there, they locked the door behind themselves to say that it was behind a locked door. They knew what it was. They delivered it there. It's entirely different. And then they said, we'll come back later and argue about whether this was classified or not classified or something else. It's happened with numerous presidents. I would say probably every president that has left the White House in modern history, this has probably happened with. Here's what happened with Joe Biden. This was in all likelihood not delivered to this office that is what I would say it's on Lobbying Row of Washington, D.C. here, in an office building filled with lobbyists, restaurant downstairs. Those items were not delivered to that location by the National Archives and Records Administration and then put behind locked doors so that they knew exactly where it was and what it was, and then they were going to come back and have a conversation about it later. That's not the case of what happened here. Two very different scenarios. But again, going to the weaponization of government or, by actions or the lack of actions, we're going to see what the Department of Justice does on this as compared certainly to what they did with President Trump. And I'm going to bet that it's not going to be an equal application of the law. So in that, I think we got time for about one more question. Let's put one up here. As always, if you want to do these questions, these Q&As with us, like, subscribe. You'll know when we're doing them. The days here in Washington are these nonstop days, different meeting every 15 to 20 minutes. Just before this, this entire office was filled up with every Republican member of the Florida delegation and their chiefs of staff as we were going over issues specifically related to Florida, all here in my office. And so there's always something every few minutes here. So we try to squeeze these in when we can to get you the information and to answer your questions. So let's go to a question here. How can you fix the IRS without allowing them to audit us and take out money? So the IRS audits Americans. That's not going to come to an end. Do we believe that the IRS should go out there, double their size to do something very specific, which is come after the American people, specifically to audit them? They're not there to get you a faster refund. They're there to come after you, just like coming after people that make Venmo transfers of $600 or more. You name it. It's the government coming after you. So the government is supposed to be of, by, and for the people. And the one thing that I can tell you about dealing with the IRS and people that get letters and phone calls from the IRS is this. It is an inherently stressful situation. The IRS does not, I've yet to see them. I can't say it's never happened. I will say that I have yet to see it happen this way, where they've worked with an individual, giving the individual the benefit of the doubt, assuming that the IRS, putting the onus on the IRS, that they might have made a mistake. Dealing with situations where it was easy for those that were contacted by the IRS to get back in contact with the IRS, whether through letter or phone call, getting somebody, an email back unit. I've yet to see the situations where it was done easily, right? It is a stressful situation to think They might be coming after you for a mistake that was made 4 or 5 years ago, and they're going to garnish your wages as a result of it, or they're going to charge you interest for the last 4 or 5 years on something that was, a very honest mistake. More than doubling the size of the IRS to come after people, and this also has been acknowledged by study, by independent audit, here in Washington, D.C., about who this would most affect. It would most affect individuals making less than $75,000 a year. They would receive the brunt of these audits. That's not the direction that we need to be going in here. It's a different direction than what we as Republicans believe needs to be taking place. And what we as Republicans, me specifically, I'll talk about myself, needs to be taking place. It means we need to not be spending your money. We need to not be sending your money overseas, not be spending your money on wasteful programs. Let me give you one specific program that's on my mind right now. So I sit on the Foreign Affairs Committee. One of the things that was in the recent $1.7 trillion spending bill that was passed on Christmas Eve. One thing that was in there was something about border security. Now, here's the item that was on border security in there. It wasn't to secure the southern border. It wasn't something like $700 million to secure your border here in the United States of America. It was an autopilot border security program that's been in place for years to go out there and secure the borders of Oman, Egypt, Tunisia, Jordan, and I might be missing a country in there, a couple other Middle Eastern countries right there. So hundreds of millions of dollars of your money to go and secure, literally, that is the language in the bill, to secure the borders to reimburse for border security in those countries. But the U.S. southern border, it won't get those dollars to secure the border of your nation and prevent people from coming in here legally. That is an example of where spending priorities need to change, very obviously, in my opinion. So in that, I think we've covered a number of issues, that all the questions. So they told me to make sure to give you all the office phone number. So here's the office numbers. We put them up on the screen. For all intents and purposes, it does not matter which office you contact, whether you call Jupiter, Port St. Lucie, whether we have offices to meet you in Fort Pierce, in downtown Stewart, across the breadth of the district. We can meet you in a restaurant if that's what it takes. You let us know. We're always happy to do that. We do a lot of town halls. A lot of people may not know that. We do a lot of town halls. Years ago, we used to do them in large auditoriums where we take a big gymnasium and you'd get hundreds, maybe thousands of people that would come and fill up these rooms. Here's why we stopped doing them in that way. We stopped doing them in that way because what you would get is people that would come in from neighborhoods not in our congressional district, from around the state, that would come in there simply with the purpose of disrupting and not letting people whom I've actually represent have the opportunity to ask their questions. And we did this for hours and hours and hours on end. Sometimes all day long we do these. I enjoy doing these kind of meetings, answering people's questions. So what we started doing was this, and I know I'm going off topic here, but what we started doing is this. We always love to have invitation to come to people's businesses or neighborhoods or communities or homes, you name it, and answer people's questions. Do town halls with people that live in our neighborhoods and live in our communities. So if you have a clubhouse and you want me to come there and answer questions, doesn't matter, Republican, Democrat, independent, non-voter, you want to know what's going on in your country, in your congressional district, let us know. And I will come by there, and I will come by and answer the questions for the people in your neighborhood, or standing inside somebody's garage, or in the meeting place of somebody's business. You name it, we are doing these constantly. But you can call about that. You can call about your questions or problems with the IRS, Department of Veterans Affairs, you name it. Number one thing that we do, number one thing, it's not write pieces of legislation. It's help the people back home deal with the federal agencies in whatever problems that they have with. So if you have a problem with one of these federal agencies, I always say it like the old A-team. If you have a problem, nobody else can help. And if you can find us, hopefully you can find us really easily, then maybe you can hire the A-team. Well, give us a call. We'll be your A-team. We'll help you get through those issues. Number one thing that we do, couldn't be more proud of that. In that, as always, an absolute honor to represent you. I couldn't be more proud of our home, the people that live in our community, our law enforcement officers, our members of the military, our doctors, nurses, schools, you name it. We have such an awesome home. I brag about it all the time. And in that, I'm happy to just be able to say thank you again for the honor of being your representative. I wish you all the best, and I'll see you all around home.